Well, welcome. Good morning. We are here with special guests today. You know, we're here with a pretty hot topic, right, Mark, with security and whatnot. But I'm Steve Riat from Nex-Tech.
I'm Mark Wietbrock with SonicWall. I'm a territory account manager for Missouri and Kansas, and working with Steve and the rest of the Nex-Tech team here on security solutions for your network and keeping the bad guys out.
Excellent. And of course, you know, we've brought you in as an expert. You know, there's so much in security that I don't know that any one person can know everything that's going on. But our goal today is maybe to give our audience just a little bit of a chance to understand maybe some high-level threats that are out there and what to maybe give them a basic level of protection. And obviously, we're always available as a resource for anybody that wants to get even further into the weeds here. But maybe the first thing we ought to do is start building out the picture of the threats.
Yep. So, I mean, we're going to go ahead and take a look at what's in the news. And if everyone is familiar with what's in the news, last year for 2015, Ashley Madison was hacked. And this is the first time we actually saw human life was actually compromised with that threat that existed out there. So that's definitely something to consider out there, you know, with what's going on with these hacks. A lot of other companies are seeing a dollar amount from a risk perspective that factor into that too. So everything's about having exposure. So there's good exposure and bad exposure. In this case, it's bad exposure.
Absolutely.
Absolutely want to manage that risk from that perspective. You know?
And so you said, you know, human life was really threatened the first time, but really specifically, you know, somebody ended their life because of some of that leaks that was attached there.
Correct.
And that was one of the first time we can definitely see that that's happened. I think this is unfortunately probably the beginning, not the end, right?
I would say that too. So if we see what the threats are, and this is not just what's happening here in the United States, this is what's happening globally, and that's where we're after it from a security perspective to absolutely protect what's going on from whatever that threat is and whatever that source is.
Absolutely. And I know that, you know, well, I probably ought to tell everybody, look, we've got a ton of content today, and we're going to do our best to get through this.
Sure.
But, you know, so if we move a little quick, of course, you can replay this video or, you know, reach out to us so we can get this content to folks too.
So we have hackers that are out there, and as you say, in the news, you know, hackers are just leaked personal data of U.S. military officials, and is it legit? FBI demands removal of employees. You know, I mean, everything is out there. We see this all the time, all sorts of media as to what's going on. One slide I didn't have in here earlier was actually on Yahoo. So, I mean, you know, we were looking at over 1 billion IDs that were actually hacked from that, and these are definitely risks that you need to be taking a look at, you know, because everyone's now thinking, okay, is this something that would happen to me, or is this something that's going to happen to a large enterprise? I mean, if anyone's connected on the internet, it's going to happen to anyone that's connected to the internet.
So let's take a minute and talk a little bit about that. You know, one of the things that I hear from some of our customers is, you know, okay, you've given me the Yahoos, you've given me the Ashley Madisons. These are billion-dollar companies. You know, look, I'm the small shop here in western Kansas. Why would somebody care, or why would somebody try to hack me here versus focusing where they can get these millions of dollars?
So let's take a look at that. So, I mean, there are all avenues of getting information out there. So, I mean, so here in rural Kansas, you know, what would they be looking at? They could be looking at some companies that do have money, do have accounts, but they also could be taking a look at personal data. And that personal data could be on the medical side, could be on the financial side, it could be just personal data, it could be intellectual property. I mean, we may have startup companies that are in the area here that have something that gives them a competitive edge. If someone was able to take that information, now that would give someone else a competitive edge. Someone gets that information, they could sell it on the black market, you know what I mean, and it could just go viral from that perspective.
And some of the things that we've seen is it's not about the size necessarily. It might be the lowest hanging fruit. So if somebody doesn't have some of the basic protections, they're going to go after them first because it's easiest.
Correct.
The next thing might be that, you know, nobody knows geographically necessarily that somebody's in western Kansas, say. They treat somebody equal as if they're in New York, Russia, or in western Kansas, right? Because it's the web, and it's just an address that can be got there pretty easily, right?
Correct. So if you look at that now, if the hackers may know what that IP address range is, so they may know that it's in the U.S., they may know that it may be coming out of Kansas, but it just depends on the level of that hacker out there and what they're actually doing and what they're actually going for. But to your point, though, Steve, they're looking for low-hanging fruit. So a lot of this comes from having up-to-date security patches and vulnerabilities that are easy. So they're going after the weaknesses in all aspects, whether it's small personal businesses, large enterprise, where patches are not actually being done to those systems. And that's where you and the Nex-Tech team are actually coming along to actually, not just from a security perspective, but patching systems and servers and everything to avoid those vulnerabilities before they actually happen.
So we're looking to elevate that floor, I guess, if you will, of threat. So at least the known threats are absolutely covered for sure.
Absolutely.
And we're going to talk about layering as we go through this process today, but making sure that we continue to elevate folks' level of security is the most important thing that we can probably get done today.
Absolutely. So as we see here that we have on the slides, 1.5 billion accounts were attacked by Yahoo. Now we take a look at malware. So malware attacks for 2015, were 2x up on the malware, and that was for 2015. So when we get that to come out for 2016, we're probably going to even see an increase on that as well too, Steve.
Absolutely.
Now we see growth in malware samples in 2015 up 73%. These numbers just keep on going up exponentially as well.
Now, before you get too far down here, we're talking about malware. Can you define that just a little bit for us? Because people get confused, in my opinion. You've got virus, you've got malware, you've got hacks. And in my opinion, they're kind of all three working together. But help us understand.
So think of malware now. So you can have malware in the form of something that's embedded into something that's projecting out. So it could be malware could be a sample that's actually embedded into a file, and now from there it's actually going out and phoning home and giving malicious content back to where its home base is coming from. But the malware samples, are also infectious and that type too. So it goes in a different perspective. So we take a look at different security threats. So we have intrusion prevention, intrusion detection. We have anti-spyware and anti-malware as well. So that anti-spyware is spyware actually spying on what's going on. The malware is malicious content that's causing problems to infect your system, which comes over to the antivirus perspective as too. So there's different routes of which to go with that, but you want to have that layered security approach, because if we go back to our, now we can actually say, not just our dad's firewall, could be our grandpa's firewall too, but firewalls of the late 90s or early 2000s, those were strictly just based on port and destination and IP address, so stateful firewall if you'll have it. Nowadays, we're looking at the whole application stack, and that's in the OSI layer model to be able to actually prevent malicious content from coming in. So we're going all the way up to the application layer, and that's where the next generation firewalls are able to take a look at that.
And we're going to get pretty deep into that here as we continue on, so I don't want to continue to interrupt you.
So 61% average of encrypted traffic for 2015. So that means now what we're seeing is that 61% of all internet traffic leaving a network now, Steve, is now encrypted. We can thank several of our providers out there that said, hey, if you want to do business with us, then you're going to have to actually have encrypted traffic. So with
sounds like a great thing.
It sounds like a great thing, but our firewalls are not designed to actually do that out of the gate to inspect that traffic. So we now have to tweak it a little bit and turn on different services, which causes a little bit more load. But, nonetheless, we are now seeing 61% increase in that. And if we're not actually inspecting that traffic, we're trusting all the sites that we're actually going to.
So what I think you just said was, we now know 61% of the internet traffic is encrypted. And if you haven't really looked at your firewall in the last year or two, you're probably ignoring 61% of your traffic?
Absolutely. So if you're saying, hey, my firewall's doing a great job, I haven't had any problems with it yet. Now, we're going to take a look at that from that perspective and say, okay, everything's fine, but all of a sudden you end up getting ransomware, okay? And that's what I actually have on the slide next for if we take a look at ransomware, where the ransomware threats are. So ransomware can be embedded in that SSL traffic. So you may go out to a legitimate site, Steve, and say, "Hey, listen, I'm looking for a recipe. I want to, make something for the weekend. It's a legitimate recipe. It's in a PDF file. We download it, and all of a sudden you have ransomware, and your machine is locked, and you can't do anything to even print out that recipe, for the weekend."
And let's define ransomware for folks that I'm sure they've heard the term, but specifically, ransomware, one of the things I see is that's where your local files get encrypted and you don't have access to them, even though it's your machine. And then essentially that's where the ransom part of this
That
comes
is correct.
from, where you have to pay a ransom, usually in Bitcoin. So you've probably heard this term, had no idea how to interact with it, but you have to get Bitcoin to pay a ransom.
To pay a ransom.
To get your own files back.
To get your own files back.
Yeah, so this has been really nasty. I know we're seeing a ton of it still. Even beyond that traffic continues to migrate. So threats that we saw yesterday are now just tweaked just a little bit, and now it's a new threat that we hadn't protected against.
Correct. And so now if we're not inspecting that SSL traffic, back to the ransomware, so you think it's legitimate traffic that's actually coming into your network, and everything looks fine, and all of a sudden now you get a message on your screen that all your files are locked, and you now have to pay that ransomware, in the form of Bitcoins. And here's the thing: the ones that are actually launching these attacks out there for the ransomware, there's no guarantee that you're actually going to get your files released back to you again.
You're hoping the bad guys are ethical?
Yeah, you're hoping that the bad guys are ethical and that they're working through Bitcoins, from that perspective. And we see some companies that are actually paying very large amounts of Bitcoins to actually be able to get, some companies that are actually getting their data back to them or files released, and some that are not. Now, the other option that we need to take a look at, and this is where you and the Nex-Tech folks can help, is to make sure that you have backups of your systems. Backups
That's the only real 100% guaranteed way of getting it back. And I want to paint a quick picture. We've had some folks that we've dealt with that have had to pay ransoms. Either they didn't have solid backups, they didn't have good protection, they didn't have both.
Sure.
But I want to throw out an example, and I'm not saying this happened for sure, but, imagine if it became payroll time. You go to log into payroll, and the machine says, now you got to pay this ransom. You have really two choices at the point if you don't have a backup: pay the ransom or miss payroll.
Or miss payroll. Correct.
And obviously that could affect tens, hundreds, thousands of lives. And so the people did end up paying the ransom. They did get the files back. The next question that you then have to ask yourself is, what's going to stop it from happening again? And obviously changes have to be made.
Correct. And so changes can be made. So again, back to stress the fact that backups are extremely important. Yep. But now we can have security measures in place. So using that next generation firewall to have that layered security approach to be able to prevent those intrusions from coming in, to prevent that ransomware, and then also inspecting that traffic as well. And then also too, as we're going to get involved with a little bit here, but also too, we have sandboxing technology now that out there is looking for those malicious files ahead of the threats coming into the firewall, where we can actually write a zero-day threat for that, to add to that grid network from a firewall perspective.
As Kristen watches in on us, she's thinking, what exactly does her kid's sandbox have to do with this whole situation?
I'll tell you what, it is a very complicated sandbox, and ones that, a lot of people are playing in nowadays from the sandbox perspective. But sandboxing is a way out there that intelligent firewalls or next generation firewalls have the ability to actually take a look at a file size and say, okay, this file doesn't look normal. Okay, there's something that seems not normal with it, and we checked it against our database of existing signatures out there, and something is not right. So now the firewall then will actually throw it back up to a co-location, if you'll have it, or a cloud environment, to actually take a look at that firewall or take a look at that file, actually detonate that file in the cloud, and then actually write a signature for it and push it back down to a grid network, so that you can actually have that zero-day threat analysis. And back to now actually having that fancy sandbox, if you'll have it. So and then and there are all different ways of actually doing that out there in the industry. But the main thing is that you're having, again, and I cannot stress the fact that, that layered security approach is where we're building on to be able to, if a would-be hacker is gonna go out there, if he comes and knocks on your front door and if it's locked, is he going to go around and look to see if the back door is open? He may or he may not. But if the front door is open, he's just going to go right in.
Sure.
And
it's almost a guarantee hack.
Right. So, but now, if you lock the front door and if you have the back door locked, now, if he has time, he may go out there and take a look. Okay, are all the windows unlocked? Can I get in through a window? Are there other entry points of which I can get in? And after 3 or 4 or 5, that would-be hacker or the burglar might move on and say, okay, this is just taking up too much of my time. I'm going to move on to what we discussed earlier, that easy, low-hanging fruit, to be able, I'm going to find multiple front doors that are open up and just go in and get what I need to get.
Gotcha. And really, use that. I'm going to talk in a little term here. That sandbox to me is that 0-day threat detection.
Correct.
And that may be a term that people aren't familiar with. And to me, what that means, and please correct me where I'm wrong, we're looking for known threats. But if it's not been seen before,
correct,
we can't protect against it.
Correct.
That's where sandbox come in, because it says, hey, this looks strange. I haven't seen it before. Let me go see it in the sandbox. Oh, that is bad. Now I'm going to protect you against it, even though I might have been the first person to see that threat. Now I've been protected. And so it's getting down to that point where we can really protect people against the known and potentially the unknown.
Now, the other thing I will say, so there are different sample sizes of those files out there too. So there's limitations on that, but we're working on those limitations right now. But for the most part, though, the malicious file contents, they are small in size because they're not looking for a heavy payload. They just want to get in and then get a system infected and then get the payload out from what they're doing from that perspective.
Let me let you continue on.
So ransomware, serious risk. So we've been talking about that a little bit already, Steve, but ransomware and collect that ransom, from hospitals, from banks, from data, from anyone, and again, we're going to repeat this again too, good security policies and procedures in place, and also good backups, and just a good hygiene of what you're doing on your network environment to be able to prevent those would-be threats from actually coming into and infecting your network. Now, we take a look at the numbers, and I want to show you here, Steve, and this is something, so whether you're a startup company and you're earning your first dollar, okay, or whether you're a multi-billion-dollar organization. As you can see from this slide here, Steve, we're taking a look at what the vulnerabilities are and the dollar amounts that actually add up to that. So you have to ask yourself, okay, if we are infected, if we do have ransomware, if we have malicious content, if we're off the grid and we can't actually run our business, at what point are we out of business?
Sure.
Okay, that is a risk procedure that you actually have to take a look at and say, from a security perspective, where are we? If we're a $2 million company, after we've had allegations put up against us and everything from a threat perspective, and if we have to pay for anything, are we out of business at $100,000? Are we out of business at $500,000, or what is it that dollar amount? And then every organization, and even down to the personal level too, you have to be able to manage your risk as it relates to security. So those are all factors that factor into. Everyone is different. Every business is different.
Sure.
So you need to take a look at it from that perspective. So how do the threats get through? So we're taking a look at phishing attempts. We're taking a look.
You spelled phishing wrong.
Well, that's the way my dad was telling me to fish. But anyway, you're right. Since my son Nate was actually doing the spelling bee this morning, he would say, "Hey, Dad, what are you spelling fishing with a P for? It's with an F." So you're absolutely correct. So, but phishing is very, very good technique that a lot of the good hackers out there are using nowadays to be able to actually get to their resources, if you'll have it, of what they want to get. So they're after that payload of either bank accounts, personal information, content that's actually going to net them cash. Because let's look at it this way. I mean, there are hackers out there that want to make money.
Yep.
Okay, there are hackers out there that are paid for by governments, all across the globe, and for right now we think it's just a globe. We don't think there's any alien stuff out there yet, but you never know, But, make no mistake, they're in their own business too. And as we take a look at this here, so we have the phishing attempt, we also take a look at exploit kits. So if you're a would-be hacker out there, and it's like, what? Hey, I'm doing this, and oh, wait a minute, I just want to be a hacker now, So you could actually buy a lot of inexpensive exploit kits, and you can start doing devastation on as many networks as you want to do. Now,
with very little knowledge.
With very little knowledge, I would not necessarily recommend that.
No, probably not the best ethical behavior.
No, I can tell you this. So I actually retired from IBM 7 years ago, and I was actually on a team where my job was to be the white hacker. So I actually did, on firewalls of back in the late 90s and early 2000s, but my job was to go out there and poke holes through the firewall and make sure it was actually doing its job. But now you can actually do that, by saying doing a few $100s and having exploit kits. We've actually seen now too, there's a lot of talent out there in the United States and across the world too. We also see during spring breaks, across the world, we actually see variations of intrusions actually go up because there's a lot of free time on a lot of smart.
There's a lot of young talent looking for a challenge and cash.
Absolutely, and sometimes it's cash, sometimes it's that challenge. Hey, I was able to do that. Were you able to do that? So I mean, you have to look at it from that perspective too. And then also too, external devices, curiosity kills. I don't have to tell you. I mean, USB drives. Okay, yep. USB drives are curiosity. Okay?
Yeah, we had that conversation this morning, didn't we?
We did because we had to move that file over. You know?
This presentation that you're actually looking at. I hand you that flash drive, and the first thing he does looks at me and goes, "Can I trust you?" And that's
Absolutely.
a valid question.
It's a valid question,
and it's not even about trusting me, because I might have thought it's trustworthy, but something was on it that hadn't hit me yet.
Correct. And so now from that perspective, then Steve, I have good security measures on my laptop, and then also too, I have good backups of my laptop too. So I mean, I'm protected. Now the point is that are your customers at Nex-Tech, are they protected as thoroughly as that? Do they have good backups? Do they have good security on their devices that they have? Do they have good firewall measures in place? Are they using a firewall? All those are things that you can do and provide for your customers as well.
So a couple quick things. Phishing, number one targets, we've got a lot of private business owners. They are calling and phishing and emailing and Facebooking and Twittering and you name it, they're after you because you own a business, which means you have access to the keys to the kingdom. So that's what phishing is probably going to look for. So
absolutely.
Be aware that if somebody calls and they call and say, "Hey, I'm from your software provider. I need your credentials." They're after the nasty stuff, right? So they're gonna get to your goods.
We'll put up this next slide here. So I mean, we'll go back to I misspelled phishing, but we still have the hook out there though. Okay, so make no mistake about that. So John here was working on his expense account and decided to surf the internet. Now he logs in a personal email address, and he gets an email, from an attorney offering him an unclaimed lottery. Now I want to tell you a little story. So we are now completely SonicWall, but we were Dell SonicWall. But on the Dell SonicWall side, a few of the Dell AEs that I worked with, one of them actually came up to me, about a year ago and said, "Mark, you know what? I just have one more check that I need to send to this prince in Africa, and I'm going to be able to retire and I won't have to work for Dell anymore."
Yeah, if it's too good to be true.
It is, and I'll tell you, I mean, whether we're here in western Kansas, whether we're in a major metropolitan city, I mean, there are all types of threats out there, okay? And those phishing attempts are real. I mean, people will call up, and we'll go through a couple other scenarios, but I mean, they're after money, In this case here, John was doing his expense account, and he just said, "Hey, I can make a little bit of cash here based on this email that was sent to me." So now we take a look at spear phishing. So now John is working on his weekly expense account and decide, that one actually doubled up here. So we'll actually go off to catching the lunker, and we'll build this one out here too. So, yep, there we go. So anyway, if you see some of the reports out there, there were a few companies, and one in a major metropolitan city, but they were actually buying a company in China, okay? And one of the C-level executives actually received an email saying, okay, we need to make the payments to be able to purchase this company in China, okay? Everything looked legit, okay? And so he authorized it, and several $1 million went out of the account to an unnamed account, which ended up not being the company that they were actually purchasing. So, the CEO and the executives were in a little bit of hot water for that perspective.
Absolutely.
Now, what we can say, though, too, and make no mistake here, folks, listen, whether it's that phishing attempt and we're actually getting an email from someone, we have this technology called a telephone as well, okay? And pick up that telephone and do authentication. Two-factor authentication, we can get into more conversation on that too. But someone sends you an email, I need to have $4 million to make a purchase of a company over in China. You need to actually pick up the phone and call the person who is wanting that to be authorized and say, okay, is this legit? I got this email. Are we good? Are we doing our checks and balances?
Yep. And
if we do that, then we're in good shape,
And one of the recent examples I've seen is I've been seeing emails come from my mom. Obviously, I know it's not my mom because she wouldn't send me those kind of emails. But it sure looks like it came from her.
It sure looks like it came.
And, it'd be really easy to respond somehow to the information we requested.
So I personally actually had, I refinanced my house this past year, and about a month and a half into the refinance, I actually received an email from the bank, which I thought was from the bank, and the bank actually said, okay, we actually reviewed your loan and everything, and when you were doing the final closing documents, on one of the pages, you forgot to make a signature. And so the auditing department, and this is this email, we need to have you actually make a signature on that. And it was truly a phishing attempt because they sent out another one. No one ever called, and I didn't respond, and it just passed.
That's for sure, and it happens everywhere. It's everything from, you have to be so cautious, and I know that, Netflix is one of these folks that had a leak of some passwords, and it told me to reset my password. Man, I tell you what, I was so cautious because I'm like, is this legit? Is it taking me to the legitimate Netflix site to reset my password? Okay, what do they know about me? And so you have to be so careful.
Well, and then also, whether it's Netflix, whether it's your credit cards, take a look at the information when you actually set up any of these accounts. They will tell you how they will actually communicate with you, okay? Yep. If they say, listen, if you ever receive any email from us, we will actually follow that up with a phone call. I mean, look at how these creditors are setting things up, how your bank is setting up, and just follow good personal hygiene, if you'll have it, on your finances and what you're actually doing with that.
Yep.
So curiosity kills, and so here we can actually see USB drives, okay, on the next slide that we have going up here. But essentially, you could actually, Steve, we could actually go out and get quite a few. We could actually get quite a few USB drives. We could put malicious content on those and throw them out into a parking lot. And what do you think our catch ratio would be?
I know we'd at least get one. I guarantee it. And label it payroll. And
payroll.
We'll probably get,
absolutely.
We'll raise our hit stake for sure. But, yeah, that's for sure part of it is just avoid that, things that you see.
Okay, so the audience, you guys, well, now you're just looking at Steve and myself, and we're still trying to get our slides working here. But essentially, we'll just go ahead and talk about. So we're actually talking about USB drives, and if we actually had a slide that showed USB drives being dropped out, so we'll just go ahead and keep on talking from that perspective, But and we'll get that taken care of.
Absolutely.
So hopefully no one has hacked our PowerPoint presentation.
No, I'm relatively sure
I think we should be in good shape from that perspective.
So we definitely know that there's a lot of threats out there. We've talked about sandboxing. You've talked about intrusion prevention and intrusion detection.
Let's just do that then.
Help me
Let's take a look.
understand that a little bit.
So let's take a look at the evolution of firewalls then.
Okay.
So evolution of
that'd be
firewalls. So we go back, back before stateful firewalls were out there in the late 90s, early 90s. We actually had just access lists. Okay. So we were actually, and a lot of this is because the internet hadn't evolved to where it is currently today, and back then there was still a lot of point-to-point private networks, okay?
Yes.
So there wasn't a need for security until the internet was actually out there. But when the internet was out there, now you had connectivity to anyone out there who was actually connecting up to that. So access lists were a good way of actually blocking, okay, only this IP address has access to this and that and this port, and that evolved into the firewalls. The firewalls evolved into, okay, now we have a firewall, we're blocking on source port, destination port, and we're blocking on well-known ports and ports that need to have connectivity through that. Well, now as we actually take a look at the payload itself, we were only taking a look at the header information as far as the internet traffic was concerned. Mm-hmm. Now we need to take a look at the payload. So the payload is where the content is from a malicious content or what the hacker or intruder is actually after. So now we need to take a look at that whole OSI layer that we talked about earlier and where we're actually going, and that has evolved into the next generation firewall. So the next generation firewall takes us from that stateful firewall to being the next generation firewall, and now this is where we're talking about intrusion detection, intrusion prevention. So on the SonicWall side, we actually have a database coupled with that with the gateway antivirus where we have over 25 million different signatures in that database. We're adding probably between 40 to 60,000 a day to that database to be able to move forward. We also have anti-spyware, anti-malware, and web content filtering from that perspective. And that's another thing we can talk about too. And then now we're taking a look at that deep packet inspection on SSL traffic. And we're also taking a look as what we'd already talked about, the sandboxing capabilities too. But I want to step back a little bit now and take a look at the content filtering because that's something that's extremely important. We do a lot of work, from a technology standpoint, of protecting content that's out there on the internet for those who are actually behind the keyboard. And that applies a lot through our K through 12 school base because they don't need to go to sites that they don't need to go to, okay? So now that content filtering gives you the capability from a IT director standpoint, from a principal, from even the school board to say, hey, listen, this content we deem to be acceptable, so we will let it pass. The other content we're going to block this we're going to filter and block it so you don't have access to that.
Which can affect your businesses too. Maybe
Absolutely.
Facebook is not something you want. I think the statistics are people spend hours a day now on Facebook, but you don't want them to do that during work.
Sure.
Now, we have folks like Kristen whose job is to spend hours a day on Facebook, but...
And so we'll give her access to it.
Yeah, but you can definitely give control down to the individual user. You can block individual sites. In fact, you can even block sites based on geography, right?
Absolutely.
So, like, if you're not doing a lot of business with, let's just say, China...
So geo IP filtering is what we have, so we can block out China. So if you have a country that you're not doing any business with, we can actually block that. We also have botnet filters in there as well. There are multiple ways to actually do that. Now, I will say this. You need to be a little bit experienced on actually setting up a next generation firewall because it's not just hook it up and it goes. Okay?
Right.
So that's where you and the Nex-Tech team actually come in to actually configure that for the customer and make it work for what the needs are for that customer base.
And let's talk a little bit about that because that seems so simple to me. You go set it in. It does have a GUI, right?
It does have a GUI.
But the team is certified with SonicWall so that they're up to your standards of being able to deploy these devices, right? We have an acceptable level of firewall deployment that says, look, it needs to be deployed at this level. It needs to have these things set.
Sure.
Because if you don't set these right, you might as well just not have it, right? I mean, that's ultimately
that is correct.
And while I'm talking about that, one of my pet peeves, this is one of the things I always dealt with, is if you go in that back room where your internet's in and you have one of those bright blue boxes, that might say Linksys on it, just saying.
Sure.
You're not, even though I know the little sticker says firewall, this isn't what we're talking about. That's a very simple, basic. I mean, we wouldn't even recommend you protect your personal network necessarily, depending
Correct.
on how what you're doing. But that's not this deep packet inspection.
That is correct. So that is a firewall at its general baseline perspective. So I mean, so you do actually, so you have a public internet address that's actually coming into you, and then you have a private address on the backside. Yeah. So now there's a translation between the two, and
it hides it,
and that hides it, which is good. But now, and then for our customers out there that do know a little bit about internet traffic, there's IPv4 and there's IPv6 that's coming out. 6 now would actually expose everything out there, from a routing perspective. So yet another reason to have a deep packet inspection firewall perspective out there. But to your point, though, too, the Linksys router is a good, you would not believe, I mean, even those that, take, for instance, your laptop with no security on it, and you take it to any location that has Wi-Fi connectivity, and if you're not protecting it, now you're actually vulnerable to anything that exists out there.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, take a look at it from that perspective with your Linksys as well, too. So now it's out there, and it's exposed to what's going on. So now we're actually going to...
There's the flash drives that we talked about earlier.
Those are flash drives and Curiosity kills. And let's see, how many of those did we get? 1, 2, 3, 4. No, actually, we got a few. So I mean, we definitely moved that on to where we could actually get Curiosity from that perspective.
So there it shows. Looks like one left on the bathroom counter.
Absolutely.
On the receptionist desk.
We're at a local watering hole, or at a coffee shop, and I mean, you can put those anywhere, and chances are you're actually going to get someone to pick up on those. And now here's the thing: there are a lot of corporations that say, okay, this is an asset. This laptop is an asset, and they lock it out to whereby you can't actually use the USB drive. Okay,
right.
So I mean, every organization needs to understand what their security policies and procedures are and risks associated with that. And if they deem that it's okay, then they'll do that, So just how easy is it? I mean, it's pretty easy. And we've all seen it out there on being able to provide that information out there and get, I mean, we actually had I thought we got to speak for 4 hours today. Was it? No?
Nope, I'm giving you the 9 minutes.
I have more sandboxing to talk about. I have more fishing stories to talk about. No. We're going to play in the sandbox and talk about fishing stories.
There you go. Perfect.
All right, so we'll get through this as fast as we can to build it out here. But, I mean, these are all different various ways that we can actually infiltrate, and do harm to networks, that we don't necessarily need to do, but we can do. And again, we were talking about the exploit kits. We have a lot of exploit kits, and there's a lot of stuff out there that you can get to be able to, compromise a network. Now, do we want to? No, but we can. Yes.
Right.
And then also too, keeping up with the flow. Over 2 million malware samples collected in July of 2016. I mean, and now the need for deep packet inspection. So we were talking about this earlier. Okay,
Yep.
So now that deep packet inspection. So think of it this way too. So for those of you that do not know about deep packet inspection, so I mean, you're going through the airport. So nowadays, you go through the airport, they want to X-ray all your carry-on. Okay, so that's where that deep packet inspection is. So they're taking a look at everything that's in the payload and everything that you're actually taking onto the plane from that perspective.
Even then, they might look at it and go, okay, that looks a little funny. Maybe it looks like a gun or it looks like something threatening. That's where that firewall's, that security agent, if you will, that pulls you out of that line and says, wait a minute, something's up here. Let me look at what's going on here. And then blocks it if it legitimately is.
And blocks it if it's, and right. So we can think about that as the zero-day threat analysis from that perspective, or the sandboxing perspective. And so now, we see the stateful packet inspection, deep packet inspection, and we see the need for it with that X-ray vision, that those superheroes have. But our technology gives us that capability to take a look at that, and think of it too. So I mean, think of a virus, even from the medical terms, from a virus. I mean, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what you can protect until you know what's actually happened.
Yep.
You know, so think of it from a packet perspective too. So I mean, you're open to everything out there. So now, you know, you want to have the best resources available to protect against that from that perspective.
Absolutely.
So now break the malware cycle. So here we're just building out, you know, you've actually visited a page, the exploit comes through, the malware request is there from the hosting site, and then now you have malware that's actually on your machine, but now we're trying to protect it, and this is where the deep packet inspection actually comes in through our UR filtering on the page visits that we have from a content perspective, and then intrusion prevention, and then the cloud antivirus, which would be from the sandboxing or the capture product that we have on the SonicWall firewalls.
And this is where I have to take that moment and say, somebody might be able to see this and say, oh, great, I don't need antivirus anymore. Time out.
You are correct, Steve.
You still need to have that edge device antivirus and malware protection and the patching for that device. And that's that layering we talked early on about, is that all of this has to traverse the firewall. But if you took that flash drive and stuck it in the machine and it had a virus on it, if you didn't have that protection, you're going to be infected.
And great. And let's jump right back to the laptop again right now, or that device. And so from that perspective, okay, Mark, you know, so we have gateway antivirus on a firewall. We don't need it anymore, okay? But to your point, yes, you do need it. But that laptop, it goes off the network.
Yep.
And it goes home. It's off the network for a 3-week period. Someone's on vacation, okay? They're gone wherever, and no updates have came back to that machine. But it could get infected with anything out there, okay,
Sure.
when it's off the network. So that's the reason why you still need to have that antivirus or security level on that device behind the network as well, too.
Absolutely.
And let's see. So encrypted traffic here. So we had talked about this, but we wanted to show this graph really quick, Steve. You know, so 61% of all network traffic, and that was stats, you know, based on a year ago. And we're going to see that even more, you know, from a perspective for next year, too, as more and more traffic is being encrypted. And this might be another time to actually say, all right, so we're talking about SSL traffic, okay?
Yes.
All right.
That's the little padlock.
That's a little, yes. Now, everyone is just coming up to speed on SSL traffic, and the next one past SSL is TLS. So there's yet another encryption type that we're actually going to be hitting up against. So, you know, look for new enhancements from a security perspective as we take a look at this encrypted traffic that we actually have out there on the internet.
Right.
So why are organizations not inspecting encrypted traffic? So we talked about that a little bit, but so if we talk about stateful firewall, we talk about deep packet inspection, we talk about inspection of SSL traffic. These are all processes that actually cost the CPU or the multi-core engine of the SonicWall to actually do more inspection, and that's definitely labor intensive and CPU cycles for that. So again, another reason for your customers to come back to you to say, hey, listen, you know what, we would actually like to do this deep packet inspection on the SSL traffic to have that layered security approach, but if we're looking at that right now, the firewall is not going to be able to handle that. And we even see that with some of the older firewalls on the SonicWall side as well too, and other manufacturers out there. But network administrators are actually turning off security features to actually get faster throughput. That is a no-no.
Right.
You should not be doing that at all.
And I mean, when you say that, your initial reaction is to think that we're talking about a lot of money. We're really, really not.
We're not.
Especially where most of what we're doing is as a service. We can make sure that, you know, look, if you've outgrown it, great, let's just look at the next box, and it just has a different monthly fee associated with it and away you go.
Sure.
That's definitely one part of it. The other part of it with SSL is the fact that, look, that requires a little more intervention from a standpoint that these certificates on the browsers and all these things that have to happen. I know that's kind of a technical area there, but know that that's something that we can help mitigate with from a standpoint to make sure it's set up right so you're getting that full protection. And it is technical. I'm sorry to say it just requires some technical stuff. But if you're to be protected, and you have to be protected from SSL, in my opinion,
you have to.
That's what you just have to do.
So now, and also too, to that point too, if we're not inspecting that SSL traffic, so 40% of our traffic we are inspecting, but that 60% that's SSL based, we're not inspecting it. We're saying that we trust all the sites that we're going to.
And that's just crazy.
And that's crazy.
Because it's so easy to get SSL. I mean, I could create an SSL site right now. It'd take me 10 minutes and $10.
Correct.
So,
all right, so we want to talk about this, a few last slides that we have here, but protection against malware and zero-day threats. So here, what we've been talking about for last few minutes, Steve, so we're taking a look at gateway antivirus, intrusion prevention, deep packet inspection on SSL traffic, the capture or the sandboxing product that we have for threat protection, application intelligence, control and visualization, content filtering. We talked about the enforced client. So, there are certain features that you can sell, to your customer set to actually have that antivirus on the laptop or device. So actually when it hits the firewall, if the updates are not up to date or the signatures, it will actually say, hey, you need to get these updates before you actually are able to go out and surf the internet. But essentially here we're taking a look at protection against malware and zero-day threats, and that summarizes up everything that we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes.
It really does, and you've laid out a nice pattern to say this is what you should be looking for. And really, I'm afraid to say basic security in a business anymore. I know that seems like a lot of points, but that's what it takes.
Absolutely. And then I don't think we had anything else on this. I think that was that. One more slide here. So this is our grid network that we've been talking about too. Mm-hmm. So we have over 1 million devices out there actually collecting data that we can actually write against for that threat analysis, and this is protected on every single firewall that the SonicWall group has out there from a protection standpoint. So, and make no mistake, no individual company can do security prevention by themselves anymore.
Absolutely.
Okay, and that's the help from the Nex-Tech team. And again, firewalls, backups, and also, as we talked about too, if you don't know who sent you the email, then don't open it. Just use some common sense as well too.
And if anything on here, you want more information with, you can reach us here at the 785-625-7070 number. Again, I'm Steve. Or you can email me at sriat@next-tech.com. We can get you any more information based on this information.
Absolutely.
And, of course, if Aubrey has anything she wants to add, now would be the time she could add it. Hearing none, thanks, Mark, so much for
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it.
Spending the day with us.
Thank you.